rumbling in my head. I'd been out the night before with all my friends. A little worried, kind of wondering what I did. I said, Lord, please forgive me for my...
Welcome to the MattyRocks Experience and On the Road with MattyRocks, on location at the new Gander Mountain store in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Joined with special guest, country star, Mr. Darryl Worley.
How you doing, Matty?
Good.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you guys for having me down today. I appreciate it.
A couple things in the MattyRocks interviewing history here. MattyRocks' first interview in South Carolina.
That's awesome. It's going to be a good one.
I hope so. Yeah, I know it will be. And also, MattyRocks has now partnered with Gander Mountain to do his first interview at a new location.
Well, man, we got something in common. I've done a few things with Gander Mountain, but this is actually my first on-the-scene grand opening, so let's rock it out.
Well, thanks for taking part in this little history with my MattyRocks interview. Speaking of Gander Mountain, Darryl, when you hear the word Gander Mountain, you see it on a billboard, you're passing by, what comes to mind?
Two things, man. I think immediately of the great outdoors, which is outside of my family and, my faith. I think that's probably one of the biggest things in my life is just being able to spend time outside, and do my thing. And it also, I always think of home because that's where I do most of my hunting and fishing and, whatever. So that's two good things that Gander Mountain makes me think of.
Right on. Darryl, we're only a few months into the 2015 year, but what were some of the big highlights for you in 2014 before we closed out the year?
We always, we do a lot with the military. We always have. And we had a couple of homecomings that we were a part of. A lot of people think of our position right now that everything is shut down and that we're not involved, but we're still involved very much in Iraq, ramping back up in some places, and we've never really slowed anything down all that much in Afghanistan. So we've got guys constantly going out and coming back home, and so anytime we have an opportunity to do something like that, it's just awesome. And I actually got to shut down a wee bit early this past year, and spend some quality time with my family during the holidays, and that was extra special. So it's not always the case. So.
You got to fit that in.
Love it, man.
Darryl, if you would, take MattyRocks listeners back to the early years of your life in Pyburn, Tennessee. And,
you said that well.
I do my research.
I'm telling you, man.
And give us some insight to how music and singing came into your life.
Well, if you can imagine where I'm from, if you look at the states of Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, and that place right there where they all three come together, call it the Tri-States area, there's a big lake there on the Tennessee River called Pickwick Lake, and that's where we grew up, right there, about a mile from Pickwick Dam. And so geographically, we're very challenged. We're 70 miles from the nearest interstate and 70 miles from the nearest mall, so that makes it my favorite place in the world. And we didn't have a whole lot to do around there. I mean, it's not like we could load up and go to the theater. We had an old one that was, like condemned, but it just made for the music on both sides of the family was kind of our entertainment. When someone else might say, let's go to town and do this or that, we'd say let's go to the back porch and pick a little after we ate supper. So as far as having musical influence and all that in my life, it was always there. I was just the only one out of all of the family members that ever thought about, I guess, taking it to a different level and using it to make a living and pay the bills. And it's been good to me. I thank God for the gift, and we just try to share the music that we make with folks, and people, fans are always loyal, and the rest is history. It's been a lot of fun. Right. So that's how it all came about.
Who were some of the musical influences early on in your life who have helped shape and make you the great musician that you are today?
My older brother was into a lot of different kinds of music, and I always kind of migrated toward more of the country stuff, even early on. Well, we all started out on the gospel stuff because my dad was a minister, and we didn't really have a choice. You know, he said, "This is what you guys are going to play, at least on Sunday and Wednesday." And so there was that, and then I was really digging the bluegrass music early on. And when I discovered country music, for me, it was over. I mean, I didn't care if I ever heard anything else. I tried to introduce my little girl to lots of different kinds of music because I think it probably would have made me a little more well-rounded. But Merle Haggard is probably at the top for me. But I go back as far as like, you know, Hank Sr. and Jimmy Rogers, Vern Gosdin, Waylon and Willie. Gene Watson's one of my favorite country singers of all times. You know, you get on closer to the newer era, and it's, you know, George Strait and Alan Jackson, those guys. But anybody that has that more traditional sound, not necessarily what you hear on today's mainstream country radio, because I'm just not a real big fan of some of that. It's gotten so far away from what we call country. But hey, man, the business is still doing good, and those young men are promoting our genre, so I don't have anything negative to say about that either. I just love the country stuff.
Great influences you mentioned there. How instrumental was your father in the decision-making process for you to pursue music?
My dad is one of those guys that it's all about hard work, you know, and he instilled an incredible work ethic in all of us boys. But when it came down to the decision-making process of saying, hey, you know, I'm getting ready to try this, I had worked my way into a small startup company, and my background's in biology and chemistry. I'm kind of I guess, an anomaly in the country music business. I actually had a career before this career. But we did a lot of paper chemistry, and we catered to the paper mills all over the country, and my dad was in that business for a while. And, you know, his whole thing was, I don't know, son, I don't know if you want to quit this. You got a good regular check coming in. And I was like, Dad, I'm pretty sure I want to give this a try. So eventually, I think he saw how difficult I was struggling being torn between the two. And he came to me, he said, you're not getting any younger. You know, if you're going to do this, you need to go. So my mother always said, you should go do whatever you want to do and try whatever you want to try because, you know, we live in America. You can do anything you want to do. But I think I was kind of waiting on my dad's blessing. And when he said, you know, go get him, I just turned it loose of everything. I walked into my partners and told them they could have my part of the company, and I was going to give it a try. They all thought I was crazy, but, hey, it still pays the bills, so we must be doing something right.
Absolutely. How did your early involvements in the music writing process, working for the Fame Studios and EMI, and even playing the honky-tonk circuit, prepare you for where you are today as a musician?
As far as, you know, work, I did a lot of work, hard, difficult, physical labor, getting through college and stuff like that. I was a commercial fish for a while and worked as a carpenter. But probably the most difficult times of my life as far as just, you know, being exhausted and working really hard was when I was playing 4 or 5 gigs a week, writing songs for pennies. You know, my first, like, I guess you could say real paying gig as a songwriter was down there in Muscle Shoals with Rick Hall and all those guys. And if I remember right, I think I made $150 a week. So if I hadn't had the gigs to supplement that, but I tell a lot of young people that aspire to do country music as a career that if I had not gone through that time where I was, a lot of the days, the guys that were picking with me in the band, they had regular jobs they had to hold down, so I'd have to move the whole PA by myself. I didn't even have when we first started, I didn't even have a hand truck. I was carrying those speakers and stuff in, you know, up on my shoulder. And a buddy of mine at a big old nightclub one night said, you know, I got an old hand truck back here in the back that would help you a lot, and he just gave it to me. So it was tough, but I tell the young folks, you know, if you're not willing to work at this, it probably ain't going to happen because it's day and night for a lot of years until you finally lock down something. And I eventually got my start as an artist through my songwriting. And that's a craft that you really have to work at. You know, a lot of people think if you can make something rhyme that you can be a songwriter, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And And I think you sort of have to have a knack for getting inside of people's heads and inside their hearts to touch those things that we all relate to. And it's been a lot of fun, and I still learn a lot every day. So,
right on. You fast forward from that to 1994 and your path to Nashville, where you want to become a successful country singer. How did you execute that plan?
As I said before, the industry is a really weird animal. I think one of the things that I had to do, I always wanted to stay close to home because of what I said earlier. That's where I'm comfortable, in the woods and on the lake and on the river. I mean, there's not a stump on Pickwick Lake that I don't know about because I've probably had a net hung on it one time or another. And I struggled with that. And they, even in my contracts at EMI, they said, it specifically said you have to move to Nashville. So I finally made the move, and I think I had kind of started to carve my niche a little bit as a songwriter. And I was pushing 32 or 3, maybe even 34 years old by this time, and I thought, they're not going to sign me as an artist, so I might as well really dig into this songwriting thing and get me a career started. And so it was my songs and the style of writing, which I think, even to this day, I think about Merle and all that stuff that he did. And I think my writing was very much influenced by him, especially in the way that we write about things that we have lived. And so it was the songs and the songwriting that actually got me the record contract. They came out and saw me play a few times, and James Stroud and those guys over at DreamWorks decided they wanted to sign. They asked my publisher if they could just get the songs and record them on some young artist, and they said, well, we would be okay with that, but I think Darryl's got a different thing in mind. And when they approached me, I said, you know what, if you want the songs, you got to take this old man with them. So right, I signed my first record contract when I was 35 years old, and that just wasn't happening in Nashville at the time. But I told, my mom, I thank my mom and dad for giving me decent genetics. The only thing that was giving away my age at the time was my hair color, and, we got technology for that. So
I better take advantage of that. You've done very well for yourself up to this point. With that comes accolades. What to you has been the biggest accolade or award that you have received to date as a musician?
You actually, that's about the first question you've asked me that comes with most typical country music interviews. So what I'm saying to you, Matty, is that Matty rocks. Dude, give it up for Matty, you guys. He's done a lot of work for this interview, a lot of research. It's really cool because I'm not having to interview myself. I've always been the kind of person that I didn't get into music for accolades.
Right.
If you have some success, you're going to probably have a little bit of that, and I'm thankful for every bit of it. But I was nominated for so many different awards, ACM, all the CMA awards, Artist of the Year, Song of the Year. I can't, Album of the Year. I can't go back and remember all the nominations. So what I do remember is that I never won a single one of them. And I never was the golden child of the CMA. They have a little bit of a political angle on us country guys, and to me, it's more like they should be thankful that we allow them to use our music, and it's just weird. But I said all that to say, the person that I am, I grew up in a military family. And when we started having the blessed opportunity to go overseas and entertain our troops, man, those guys have honored me with some of the coolest things that anybody could ever ask for. Just beautiful plaques and things that, I can't put it into words, but what I can tell you is what I tell everyone else, including the CMA. If I'd ever won anything like that, it would have had to have hung on my wall underneath those military accolades, because to me, there's no politics there. When these guys and gals go out there and put their lives on the line, and you don't know from one day to the next if you're going to make it home, when those people are honoring you because you've gone to the war zone, put your own self at risk, taking the time during the holidays or whatever to go and entertain, if I'm not mistaken, at last count, I think we've been to the war zone in Afghanistan 14 times, and we've been to the war zone in Iraq 14 times, and then we've been to Korea. I don't know how many times we've been to the islands of the South Philippines. Anywhere we've got troops, we'll go there and try to lift their spirits or do whatever we can to help that morale. And that's a real accolade. And this other stuff, you know, when you realize that when you win a CMA award, somebody was swapping and trading votes, and this was changing hands and all that. You start, you know, you sit back and you go, okay, I know who's going to win that. And I was over at DreamWorks with Toby Keith. He just hit his big stride with How Do You Like Me Now? And I thought, man, he's going to get all the votes. And that's how it went down. So, but it's all good. I mean, I don't worry about stuff like that because I got some accolades that really mean something to me.
Right on. You've had the opportunity to play with many great artists and musicians along the way. Who to you has been the most influential artist that you've graced the stage with?
Wow. You know, it goes, you know, Alan Jackson was a great influence for me. Going out and doing his tour and seeing how he put the whole thing together was a lot of help to me. I realized that if you care enough about your people and you do that right, that you'll actually wind up with the right people because like people kind of flock together. As far as the music is concerned, I was very blessed as a songwriter. I wrote George Jones's last radio single, well, the one that really got any airplay. And there's a bunch of cool stories around that song, but the coolest one was being able to go on stage with him at one point and sing that song with him. He was one of my heroes, so you know that's a given.
The Darryl Worley Foundation and the Tennessee River Run still going strong. Give listeners and the viewers here an insight to what that is all about.
Well, we do. We started off. I just told my management at the time. I said I want to do some sort of charity events and different things to raise money for, you know, my home and my local area because my mom and dad were the kind of people that always said, you know, the most important thing that you can do in life is to not forget where you come from. And so we started the Darryl Worley Foundation, and you know, in the early days, we didn't really know what we were doing, and it's like anything else in life that you do and that you have success with is a lot of trial and error. And so we started working real hard to do like the Tennessee River Run, which the first year it was a public access television show that we shot with Pam Tillis and Gene Watson, and we didn't really need a big audience, so we're going to try to keep the number of people down. But we needed a few people there so we could, you know, shoot shots in the bleachers and make it look like we had a crowd. And no one was invited, and 3,500 people showed up. So I said, my goodness, we could do this and have some sort of a benefit, you know, and raise money. So that started the Tennessee River Run. And, of course, now there's so many different events, and it actually takes up 2 big weekends a year. We've raised millions of dollars. We built a Darryl Worley Cancer Treatment Center in my hometown, which I tried to get them to name that after someone else, but they said for you know, reasons beyond what I might understand that they needed to use my celebrity status to raise money, so I backed off of it. I had a good friend who had just passed away, and I said, with cancer, and I said, why don't we name it, you know, after him? But my little girl gets a kick out of that when we drive past it in my hometown. She goes, Daddy, you know, there's your name up on that building. And the letters are huge. They're as tall as a car. I mean, they're and I'm like, good night. But anyway, so we did that. And now we're in the process of acquiring some property. And we'll probably break ground sometime this year on a wellness center that will be, for the most part, directed at helping some of our youth get off of drugs and alcohol. Let's see. We add new events to the River Run every year. We're doing a water boat poker run this year. We've always had the event, but we decided to turn it into one of our huge events. And we've already landed a $50,000 sponsor for that, and we're going to try to find another $50,000 sponsorship to match that one, and that'll take our whole cause to a different level. So, man, we've got a ton of stuff going on. There's a good chance that we may be having Alabama there for the concert this year. They came to Savannah, Tennessee 31 years ago before anybody knew who they were, and I know they spent a lot of time playing here in the Myrtle Beach area. So if we get them back for this year, it'll be huge for us.
Well, it's quite the event and a packed schedule, like you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Part of Team Weatherby. What an honor to be part of that group of firearms. How did that whole opportunity come to be for you?
Man, I was talking to a buddy of mine who has his own outdoor show, and they have a nice little production company. They go out and document and film a lot of stuff for different folks. But he told me he had this thing going with Weatherby where he was doing a lot of their shooting for Weatherby TV online and other things. And he said they had asked me about a country artist that might be interested in doing something with Weatherby. And I'd always been a huge fan of Weatherby firearms. And just the fact that they're American-made is a big deal to me. I mean, they do have guns that are assembled overseas, and some of their shotguns are made in Turkey, but the guns that Weatherby puts out that I like are those really beautiful walnut stocks and, just a classic bolt-action rifle, and all that stuff's made right here in America, so that meant a lot to me. And they're a small group. They're not a huge, pouring the money out on you company. It's not about that. They pay us mostly with product. So now I got a Weatherby rifle in just about every caliber with several different versions of them. And I try to, get some of those rifles for my family members and dear friends because it's just a special thing to own one. They do a lot of different events, and so they fly us all over the country, but the team members are amazing people. I mean, I think they really spend a lot of time picking the guys and gals because they want down-home people that care about, the same kind of things that I care about, home and family and God and country. And so we got, Chad Mendez from the UFC. He's just a great kid. Brendan Clark from the PBR. He's retired now, but he was still riding bulls when I got to know him. Bear Pasco, who was a Super Bowl champion, tight end, played for the Giants, and now he's playing for actually, he left Atlanta this year and may be working on a deal with the Cowboys. Willie Bloomquist, a professional baseball player. Jessie Duff, she's like the 5 or 6 time national champion pistol shooter, and let's see, there's actually a few more, but I guess what they did was they picked someone from all different professions and all different genres to be a part of the team, and it's strictly a kind of a promotional thing. And so I know a lot of people approach them now and say, what was your motivation to put this together? And they said we just wanted to be noticed, and I think they've done a real good job with that. And it's definitely affected their sales and numbers, but Weatherby's one of those companies that don't really care so much about growing into something bigger than they could handle right there in their little shop in Paso Robles, California. They're just more about keeping the quality where it is and making the rifles that shoot the hardest and the most accurate. So it's good to be a part of that team. I had one of my favorite guns out in Colorado this year, and we were shooting a 40-inch metal plate at 1,000 yards, and I thought, man, I never dreamed that I'd be able to do this with a rifle. So I killed my first deer. I had quit hunting with a rifle until this Weatherby thing came along, and I was just really getting into bow hunting more, and I killed my first deer last year at over 500 yards, so that's a whole different challenge. It's a lot of fun, so it's cool.
You're a husband and a father. How do you balance the personal life and the music life to make it all work?
Well, you said I'm a husband and a father.
I'm sorry.
There's days my wife would debate that with you, but at the end of the day, that's the part of my life that I enjoy the most, and I haven't always been that way. I'm gonna tell you, our baby came along as a surprise, because my wife wasn't supposed to be able to have children. So, it's another way that the good Lord brings things into your life that you're not expecting that change you, and kind of, it gives him a little leverage where he can bend you in places that you haven't been bending, and he can form you into what he wants you to be. So that's how she's affected me. And but it's tough. It's really a difficult thing to juggle. At this point in my career, I could there's a couple different directions I could go. And I think I could transition into the songwriting thing, which is actually what I went to Nashville to do. And I think we would be just fine. But I have a hard time passing up some of the gigs because I still got the bug, and I want to go out and play live. But also, when you look at the money sometimes and you go, that's a pretty lucrative opportunity. It's hard to say no because, you want to be able to give your child the best at whatever she's involved in. And so I'm really juggling that a lot right now, and I'm trying to get to a point where I let more of those jobs pass and just stay at home as much as possible. But if you're going to be a country singer and you're going to be on the road, you're going to be gone a lot. I don't care how you turn it. And so it's just one of those sacrifice things. But, I think back about my childhood, and my dad was a minister, but he also worked full-time at a paper mill. And anybody that's ever been around the paper industry knows that's 2 full-time jobs, especially if you're in management. And so when he wasn't working, he was out visiting with his congregation, and my mom was like, it was almost like a single parent. And so I think what it boils down to is if you make that time when you're at home really count, and it's quality time, and they know that you love them and that you're doing a whole lot of what you're doing because you want to bring home the bacon, I think in the end it'll all come out all right.
Right on. Darryl, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment as a musician to date?
Wow. No one has made me think this much about my career in a long time.
That's the MattyRocks Experience.
It's probably what I alluded to before. I think the fact that, growing up in a military family, I didn't have to really give it any thought when they approached me about going overseas into the war zone to visit and entertain our troops. And I didn't, you hear all these stories from the warriors in your family, and you think because you've heard all this stuff firsthand that you're going to know exactly what's going on over there in the war zone. But as soon as I hit the ground in Afghanistan the first time, I thought to myself, you don't know until you go. And so if you're out there today and listening to us and you've served in the military or if you've ever been deployed, hats off to you, because it's not an easy gig, and it'll inspire you to no end to see what these people do on a daily basis. It's not a gig for everybody because everybody cannot wrap their head around going out on the job every day and taking a chance on getting killed or not coming home to your family. And at the same time, they couldn't possibly wrap their head around taking someone else's life, which is exactly what has to happen in some situations. So that's the real side of war that we don't ever talk about. And when it got to a point where, the higher ups in the military were inviting me to come to events and do a couple songs, and I realized it wasn't really about the music. They were getting me there so they could honor me somehow. To me, it meant more to me than any music award could ever mean. And I think that's probably my biggest accomplishment outside of the songs that I've written and had recorded by some of my heroes, George Jones, Charlie Pride, people like that. And I'd still love to get a Georgia Strait cut. I had a song on my first album called Too Many Pockets. It was a little swing tune. These are the kind of mistakes you make when you're young and stupid. Well, not so young, but anyway, we talked about that. George wanted to record this song, and I told Frank, my producer, I said, we've already got the vocal on, and it sounds great. I think I'm going to hang on to that and put it on my album. And that was a mistake. So anyway, we know that now.
What will be the key ingredient that keeps you making great country music for many more years to come?
Well, I mean, I think it's really goes back to the paying the bills, and the key ingredient in any type of music is those people you see standing right out there. And, you know, God willing, the folks that know what I'm about and the folks that love country music are not going to go away. I do believe that as a whole, the industry has kind of alienated a lot of people from our genre of music because they've allowed it to turn into something that only the really, really young people are jumping up and down about. And I think, you know, I look out at this audience and I think these are the guys that love the same kind of music that I love, and I miss it, and it'll be back. It's something like that good doesn't just go away and never come back. But I think that we have to pay attention to, if you go back and look at the numbers, you know, the late 80s and early 90s, country music was selling more records than it's ever sold in the history. And if you think about the music was out then, you know, you got people like Randy Travis coming onto the scene, and he revived that traditional sound. And I mean, I miss it. I can't tell you how much I miss it, but I believe that the audience is the key ingredient, and then if the good Lord sees fit to keep channeling those songs down, I'm just going to keep on doing what I do. I hope to wind up out on my farm in West Tennessee and sit on the deck and feed the deer and the turkey and just sit there with my guitar and turn out those country songs until they take me over to the graveyard.
What does the future hold for Darryl Worley?
Lord only knows. Hopefully I'll collect a few more Weatherby rifles. I love to shoot stuff. I got a new song. I might even play it. It's so new I'll probably forget the words, but one of the lines says, I love killing what I eat, and the fishing is pretty good most days. So a whole lot of that, I hope. And you know, just the opportunity to get out and do things with people that you really like, just like hanging out with you guys here today. Gander Mountain might be part of my new game plan. We'll see how that works out.
Where can fans keep up with everything going on with you and including all the great music you're putting out?
We're getting ready to totally revamp our website, and it's good now, but it's going to be like supercharged here in about 2 more months. And we've got 5 different projects going right now, one of which I hope will wind up in Gander Mountain stores. It's called Music and Memories, and it chronicles, it's music and DVD documentary of my journeys to the war zone. And I think people would, if I can watch it, other people will love it. And honestly, my wife and I watched a rough cut of the documentary, and it was compelling, to say the least. And it's all about shining a positive light on what our military does. You know, so many things concentrate on the negative side of whatever they're doing, and this is all uplifting for our troops, and they need that. So I'm proud of that. We got a greatest hits coming this year. I'm going to be finishing up my first gospel project this year. So all that stuff will be available online, and you'll be able to get the information right there at DarrylWorley.com.
Right on. Darryl, I'm going to give you the opportunity to send a message to MattyRocks listeners all around the United States and around the world who are going to hear this interview. What would you like to say to them?
Well, keep it country, folks. And when I say that, I mean your music, and don't forget we're American, and that's a huge responsibility these days, especially these days. And also support to my man Matty, because this is without a doubt, in probably 12 or 15 years of doing interviews, the most in depth and the most prepared of anybody that I've interviewed with, and he's actually made me really dig deep back into my bag of tricks and think of things that I haven't thought of in years and years and years. So hats off to you, brother.
Thank you.
And it's just good to be in South Carolina, man. You guys rock down here. I wrote some of my early hits right over here in Garden City, so thank y'all for the inspiration.
Darryl, thank you very much for taking the time out of this great event to sit with me. This was truly an honor. Continued success to you and everything you have going on in your musical arena. You've heard it here, MattyRocks listeners. On the road with MattyRocks, Darryl Worley. MattyRocks out.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.